Ross Mullen is a Canadian-British actor and puppeteer who's with us here just now. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great as well. So I
hmm
just want to get straight into it and ask, how did it all start for you? How did you first get interested in the kind of acting and puppetry, if you were interested in that when you were younger?
well, when I was a young boy, when I was about, gosh, really young, I suppose about four, I was very interested in animation. Like, I really wanted to be on Scooby Doo. I actually wanted to be a cartoon character. I think I went on and on about it so much that my mother said it's not possible physically to be a cartoon character, but you could be an actor. And and this kind of tickled my sort of imagination. And I also, I grew up with Sesame Street and eventually the Muppets, because the Muppets didn't come around until I was about 10 or 11.
Mm.
But I had this fascination with puppets for sure. But they weren't really the lip syncy kind of puppets that
Uh,
everybody eventually had on the Muppets. They were more like those finger puppets,
I
like the
like
way
Sooty.
Sweep is. Yeah, Sooty and Sweep there.
Yeah.
And so I used to put on puppet shows a lot, and I did a lot of stuff when I was a kid. I mean, I'd put on puppet shows. I would also dress up as Mary Poppins and do all of the music for Mary Poppins. You know, I had a definite interest in everything sort of theatrical, television oriented, cartoony. Eventually, my parents succumbed and put me into private acting classes when I was about 13 years old.
Wow.
Then I went on to drama school, where I really excelled a lot doing mask work.
Mm.
And when I left drama school, I went into a mask theater company. It's a commedia dell'arte company in Canada. Worked there for 4 years. And when I left there, I moved to the UK in 1991, just
Mm.
kind of on a whim. I just kind of came here on holiday.
Yeah.
My dad's from Northern Ireland, so I had a British passport. So I thought I'd travel and work. And the Muppets, Jim Henson's company, were looking for new Muppeteers in their Camden Creature workshop. And I applied to that. And so they trained me as a Muppeteer for 3 months, which
Wow.
I didn't entirely love,
Yeah.
but I did. And I got that skill. So everything kind of came full circle for me. Things just kind of fell into my lap by way of interest, I suppose.
Yeah. So, what was your first role that you were working on?
Wow. I mean, my first acting role that I ever did when I was like a kid was a Tennessee Williams play,
Wow.
Suddenly Last Summer. Um, then I worked in theater for a very, very long time. My first really big film television job was actually working on Dinotopia, which was a mini series that was made around the year 2000. And it's a mini series about dinosaurs and people living together.
Yeah.
And I was actually um, playing Zippo the dinosaur, which was voiced by Lee Evans at the
Mm.
time. They were looking for somebody to do what was the early stages of motion capture. I would be the dinosaur on set. So I was kind of puppeteering his head, moving around the set like a dinosaur. I had a big long tail and a really crazy costume. That was my first big foray into television. Really.
Yeah. And then you worked on Numberjacks
Oh
as
yeah,
the number
yes.
taker. What was that like?
Well, after doing a few years of working with Nev the Bear on Smile and then
Yeah.
Bear Behaving Badly, um, I got approached to work on this television show, Numberjacks. It was really based on my look. I was very tall, and I think the director said that she wanted to go with somebody who looked very ominous and scary, but had kind eyes, is what she said. So I guess I have friendly eyes.
Yeah.
But she said, you look scary enough to be scary. Um, and really, that was just a really odd job for me.
Mm.
For a couple of years, I would just every so often go down and film all by myself because the Numberjacks
Yeah.
are all animation, right?
Oh
So I
yeah.
was pretty much the only person on set. I think we did a few times where I was working with others, but the BBC had a mandate that like I could never be in the same frame as a child because it was just too creepy. It was just too scary. So I could never be in the same frame as a child. So I'd be working on the same days, but often not really working with them. That makes sense. It's a very unusual role.
Yeah, I mean, bringing up that you're not allowed to be in the same camera frame as a child could be taken in very strange ways.
Well, that's exactly what they were trying to avoid, right?
Yeah, I suppose. And it's interesting you mentioned Nev the Bear, because I never realised before researching you that he was on another show before Bear Behaving Badly.
Bear Behaving Badly was a spin-off of a live television show called Smile, which aired every Sunday between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. And it was more like a magazine show. We would do little spots of about 5 to 10 minutes, me, Barney, and Kirsten O'Brien.
Yeah.
And we would just do little spots, little game show things. And then they would throw it to like a cartoon, like Scooby-Doo or Arthur the Aardvark or something like that. And then we'd come back, and at the end of the show, we would do like a cooking segment with Nev the Bear and a little bear bedtime story. And from this idea, Daryl McQueen, who were really the producers of of Smile, they came up with the idea of doing a spin-off show called Bear Behaving Badly. They shot a pilot and it got picked up, and we did, a number of years of it. So
yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know, how would you describe that show? Because I have some kind of fond memories of it, I would say.
Of Bear Behaving Badly?
Yeah.
I would describe it as a buddy sort of TV show. Two buddies living together, Barney and Nev, and it was sort of like an odd couple, right? Barney would go out to work during the day as a presenter because he was playing himself, basically.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I would end up staying at home, usually being observed by somebody, but I got into loads of mischief, I being the bear, right? And the bear is really, I mean, Nev the Bear is probably about 4 years old, 3 years old, maybe 5, mentally. He had little ducks as a friend. He had Keith, the koala bear Keith, who lived under the floorboards that nobody knew about. So it was a real kind of neighborhoodly fantasy. Yeah. It wasn't really heavy on the education the way sort of Numberjacks was. But I think I think why kids really loved it so much was it had a lot of social education, right? It was a lot of fun, a lot of slapstick comedy, but there was a lot of love, a lot of friendship. There was an auntie who lived next door. There was a lovely girl who lived next door who took care of him, and an angry landlord who was always chasing him around. I think kids could relate to the sort of the neighborhoodly sort of fantasy.
Yeah. And the thing that I didn't realise before researching it was that Crazy Keith was actually an illegal immigrant, and that's why he was under the floorboards.
Yeah, he was. He was like an illegal immigrant from Australia. Played by Simon Buckley. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant character, and amazing sets for that. We had the under the floorboard world, he had incredible little gadgets and stuff he had stolen from all over the apartment block, and then he'd made it into, stuff around his little lair. It was great fun.
Yeah. And then you got to do Nev on The Weakest Link as well, which was kind of like a puppet special they did.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I was on The Weakest Link for, I was driving for charity, I think it was. It was a puppet special. And I got out on, I don't know, I went out in round 4, I think it was. It was a question about cheese, I recall. The question was, what 2 colors is Stilton? And I said green and blue, whereas the answer was white and blue. The only reason why I didn't say white and blue is because white is actually not a color, it's a primary. But I didn't get into the semantics of it with Anne Robinson because she was very, very scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure Nev the Bear would have been frightened of her.
Well, yeah, Nev was, and so was I. Most of the puppeteers were, because she was very impatient. As a puppeteer, you kind of have a certain amount of preparation you have to get involved, and she didn't really like waiting around. But she did love Nev the bear, and she came over and gave him a little kiss.
Yeah. Is it quite hard to have him saying long things? Because I think a lot of the things he said in the show, if I remember rightly, were just kind of catchphrases like "No way, Jose" and "frightened" and things. So I guess when he introduced himself on The Weakest Link, I felt it was a bit, oh, he's never said this much before.
Yeah, it was very much that. Like Nev had catchphrases, and so it's really difficult to do anything like an interview with him.
Yeah.
Or, if the person who's working with him has to be in on the secret or the idea that he can only say catchphrases.
Yeah.
I mean, I usually could wrangle my way around it as best as possible, but sometimes it was really difficult, especially on The Weakest Link.
Yeah. I guess it's a bit like Sooty. Like if he was just on his own, he'd never.
No, it's difficult. I mean, Sooty, doesn't he talk? But the person
he talks
who's
in
with
the ear. But if you didn't have that person to hear it and tell the audience, then it would never work.
I guess you'd need sort of like caption bubbles.
Oh yeah, I suppose that would work. And then you also worked on a very popular show from the last few years, which I've got to admit I've never seen, Game of Thrones, and you played
Game of Thrones.
A White Walker in that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. I went from playing a little blue bear to playing a scary blue monster. Crazy. All these jobs all kind of interlink. I was working on a remake of the movie Clash of the Titans, and the makeup artist on that picked me up and brought me over to Game of Thrones for a couple of years. I think on my Instagram, there's a picture that somebody drew of what Nev the bear would look like if he was a White Walker. There's like a little version of him, which is quite cute.
Yeah. And how different is it working on a kind of kid show like Bear Behaving Badly compared to this big show that adults will watch, Game of Thrones? Is there a different kind of feel to working on it?
Well, yes and no. I mean, only down to really the sets and how it's produced. I mean, Game of Thrones, largely I was shooting either outdoors or in a very large green screen. I had like an animal, a big horse that I was working with. We would do night shoots. With Bear Behaving Badly, we were always in the studio pretty much, or on the set outside of the studio. But to be honest with you, you work in the same sort of way, always, you set up your shots, you do a little rehearsal, the director talks you through it, and then it's action, you shoot it, then you shoot it again if you need it. I think with Bear Behaving Badly, we had a faster rhythm to go to because we had a certain amount of episodes we needed to pump out in a very short amount of time. Yeah. Whereas Game of Thrones has a much larger scale production, and they can do, 3 units, 4 units all over the world, filming at any one time. So the budgets are different, but really the actual way that you work on a day-to-day basis from, 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night is relatively the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And you worked on another show that's big in the UK, another kind of sci-fi one, which was Doctor Who. Who did you play in that?
I played a couple of characters in that. My first big foray into Doctor Who was actually the Doctor Who proms at the Royal Albert Hall. That was the first time the company got in touch with me. They wanted me to replace the Ice Warrior, who was played by Spencer Wilding. He wasn't available to do it. And I was the only one who kind of fit the costume. After I did that, then they invited me to do Matt Smith's last episode playing the Silence, also because the actor couldn't be there, so I filled in the costume. But that character is iconic, and that was a very iconic episode, which then led them to invite me back to play the Teller in Time Heist with Peter Capaldi. Then after that, I came back, I think, one more time. It was Jen Pullman's last episode, and I played a sort of a wraith that is like a spirit. I think after the White Walker from Game of Thrones, what happened for a while with my career is that, you become known as the monster guy. And so people just call you up and are like, we need you to play the monster. So that kind of ticked around. I was doing commercials, horror movies, a lot of that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And what has been your favourite project to work on? Do you prefer these big budget, scary monster things, or is the nicer characters what you prefer doing?
Oh, well, it's so rare that I get to play a nice character. So Nev the Bear was quite unique in that he was like a cheeky little monkey kind of character. I will say that it probably, when in hindsight, looking back over my career, I mean, when you're actually working on a job, any job, whether it's theater, film, television, commercial, or whatever, I do feel like I absorbed myself so much in the project that, that's my favorite project at that time. But over, when in hindsight, when I look back over my career, I would definitely say probably my fondest years are working on Smile and Bear Behaving Badly, working with Nev. Mostly because he was so creative. I could be more creative with him, spontaneous with him. He's quite a beautiful character. And there's nothing really quite like when you capture the imagination or the minds of a child, and they really love it and believe in it. You don't get that from adults as much.
Absolutely. Well, if we're interested in keeping up to date with everything you're working on, where can we do that? Do you have any websites or social media?
Yeah, you can catch me on social media. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. And I also have a website, rossmullen.com. And that's about it. You can also book a cameo with me. I do cameos a lot. That's what I've been doing a lot in lockdown.
Oh, yeah.
That's kept me going.
A lot of people have been doing that. It's quite a good idea.
It is. Yeah, it's great. Keeps you in touch with your fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.